Yes, welcome for another session on communication theories. In the last session, we tried to understand and define what is communication, the theoretical aspects related to communication, the concepts of convergence, the concepts of divergence, etc., etc. Today, in this class, we will learn the variables in communication. So, in the last class, we understood that communication is a process where communication takes place between two entities. That means it's an exchange of ideas and information between two entities. That means we are talking about a process, a continuum. So in any given process, there are a number of variables to be understood. So communication is also a process. There are a number of variables which we need to understand so that we understand the process completely. So what are the variables in communication? The variables in communication are the sender or the source. The second variable is the message. The third variable is the channel, and the fourth one is the receiver. So if you look into this variable, how do we convert as a process? So let us try to convert this as a process. A very simple linear model given by Harold Laswell helps us to understand all the variables and the process of communication as well. I am not going to discuss the models right away, but anyway, I will use Harold Laswell's model to explain to you the variables in communication and the communication as a process. So, what are the variables? Variables are the source or the sender, and according to the model of communication, it means who says. So the word who here refers to the source or the sender. Then the second variable in communication is what. That means the message. The third variable in the process is how, that is the channel, and finally to whom, the receiver. You see, Harold Laswell's model, a linear model, gives us all the variables in communication like who says what to whom. Okay, so this is how we look at and try to understand the variables in communication. Now let us try to explain or understand each of these variables and see how they interact. Now first of all, why are we calling them as a variable? That's the question. In terms of research, variable is a concept or a construct which exhibits variance and takes on values. So similarly, in the process of communication, a variable is a concept or a construct which exhibits variance or what is called as change. Remember, in the very first class, I told you communication is oriented towards bringing about change, and that's exactly what we are talking about here today. So source. What is a source here? Anything can be source. Say for example, if you take this class, I am the source and you are the receiver. So what do we mean by source? A source is that thing which is initiating or the initiator of communication. So for all communication to take place, there is a need for initiation of communication and there is a need for an initiator who is considered as source. Source can be singular, source can be multiple. Now if you look at interpersonal communication that is happening here, I am the source because I am the initiator of the communication process and I am initiating the communication as well. You are the receiver because you are receiving the communication as given by me. But source simply initiating does not mean communication will be complete and will be successful. One of the major characteristics of source is source credibility. So the success or failure of communication depends on how credible the source is. So there are a number of factors associated with the source credibility. For example, is the source trustworthy? Is the source competent? Is the source safe? Is the source dynamic? Is the source having necessary qualification? So these are some of the aspects associated with the source credibility. Let us see what are these factors. Competence of the source is a factor. Trustworthiness of the source is a factor. Safety of the source is a factor. Dynamism of a source is a factor. And finally, qualification, or how the source is able to put forward his views, is a factor within the source credibility. So what do we mean by these things? First of all, as an initiator, that is me, I should be competent enough to deliver the message to the receiver. That means my success or failure depends on how competent I am in terms of delivering the message. Second, am I trustworthy? Can people trust me when I say something or when I deliver a message? So trustworthiness is another factor. Third, am I a safe source? You see this? Safety is a very important factor. Then finally, what kind of dynamism I show in delivering the message? And finally, do I have the necessary qualification to deliver this message? Say for example, qualification. If I am going to lecture on nuclear physics, will you believe me? You wouldn't believe me because you know that I am a professor of communication and obviously I cannot talk about nuclear physics. So this is the meaning of the word qualification. But credibility has its own stages. So credibility is not going to be established the moment I come in front of the camera or I enter your classroom and say, "Hi guys, how are you people? I'm going to lecture on communication theories." No. Credibility has its own stages and it's a very slow, lengthy process of establishing the credibility by the source. So let us see what are the stages, what are the factors associated with the credibility itself. The first factor is initial credibility. That is, it is a kind of an antecedent before the source initiates something. What is called as the initial credibility. That means the way I behave, the way I stand, the way you look at me, the way I enter into a dialogue. So these are some of the associated factors related to the initial credibility. Then we have the derived credibility. That means how the receiver perceives me. That means how you people look at me. That means I derive credibility from you people. That is your perception. So basically, a derived credibility is a situational factor. Then we have the terminal credibility. That means what is the kind of impression I leave on you people. At the end of the class, at the end of the session, you should feel that yes, I am a competent person, you can trust me, I have the necessary qualification and I deliver, or I am capable of initiating communication process with you people. This is considered as the terminal credibility. And finally, the most important factor as far as source is concerned is the source-receiver relationship in any given communication situation. Now, in order to explain to you the source and receiver relationship in any communication process, I will take the support of David Berlow's model of communication, where he has outlined certain characteristics for source and certain characteristics for receiver. Now, if you look at these characteristics, more or less, almost all of the characteristics are matching. That means whatever characteristics the source has as an initiator of communication, the receiver ought to have all those characteristics as the receiver of communication. Then only it is possible for us to have a perfect or more or less perfect relationship between the source and the receiver. Now let us look into what are the characteristics the source is required as an initiator of communication. First of all, a source should possess good communication skills. Of course, we will talk about communication skills at a little later stage, and probably I will spend some time, a lecture or two, on communication skills itself. That means I should have, as a source, I should have necessary communication skills to deliver the message to you. That is the most important characteristics a source should consist of. And secondly, the attitude. That means my mental makeup, my perception, my thinking about you people in front of me and about the subject I am teaching should be in consonance. Otherwise, it is impossible for me to deliver the lecture. In fact, Professor Haider has come out with a beautiful theory called Haider balance theory, where we try to understand how the source and the relationship between the receiver exists. So there should be a perfect balance between the message I am trying to create. That means I should personally believe in what I am teaching or preaching, and you should also personally believe in me, and at the same time I should also personally believe in you. So if there is a belief in terms of attitude in me, that is, I believe strongly the subject matter, I believe strongly the receiver, probably the attitude is perfect or most probably positive in nature. Then the third characteristic is the knowledge. That means I should have the enough and clear knowledge of what I am talking about. That's exactly what I told you earlier. Imagine a situation, I'm going to talk to you about nuclear physics. What do I know about nuclear physics? I may read from the book or I can Google and get some information, but that does not make me knowledgeable person as far as nuclear physics is concerned. So probably if you replace me with a professor who has done a lot of research in nuclear physics, he is a very knowledgeable person, he is a very competent person to talk about nuclear physics. So knowledge refers to the amount of information we have gathered and the kind of experience we have got in terms of delivering a particular message. Then the social system. What is the social system? The source should belong to approximately the similar social system the receiver is in. Imagine a situation, I am talking to a group of students in the Middle East, or imagine a situation where I am going to talk to a group of students in Africa. So what happens is, socially, culturally, there is a lot of difference. And this difference between the source and the receiver affects communication process and the success of communication. So by and large, the source should belong to or ought to belong to the same social system in which the receiver is receiving the information. And the next characteristic is the cultural. Culture plays a very important role in the success or failure of communication, because if I am culturally completely different from you people, definitely you will look at me as a person from somewhere else and he doesn't belong to you. The reason is I should respect your values, your traditions. So if I do not have a clear understanding about the values you are in and the traditions you practice, and probably I may not be a very successful person as a communicator or as a source. Finally, we have the status. I need to have a proper status. For example, I pick up one of you people and ask the person to come and teach for a few minutes. And I also start teaching. So definitely the status between a person who is of a status of a student and a person who is a status of a teacher makes a lot of difference as far as communication is concerned. And also, do not forget, a source has to build goodwill. This is exactly what is called as the safety factor. That means unless and I build goodwill with you people, I may not be a very successful person as an initiator of communication, or probably I may not be very successful in terms of communication itself. So these are the factors which are affecting the source as far as initiating and communication of the message is concerned. So let us go back and look into the factors. The factors are communication skills, attitudes, knowledge, status, social system, goodwill, and culture. So these are the factors derived from the model given by Professor David Berlow. Thank you very much.